Then he brought his friend here, who was an amateur geologist, and he asked his friend about the value of his gold mine. But his friend told him he hadn't found one. He had found a living limestone cavern. And his friend also told him that if you touch limestone with your skin, the oils from your skin will transfer to it and cover it. And the water that makes the formations grow won't be able to pass through it, and they won't be able to grow anymore. So since Mr. Mercer knew this, he could take early precautions to protect the cave. He made sure that everyone who went inside wore gloves and coveralls to protect the formations. However, they opened the cave just 11 days later for public tour, and they charged 50 cents gold dust or gold nugget admissions. So we like to say that in a way, he did find a gold mine. The tours were pretty different in those days. They lasted anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, and there were no stairs or platforms, and most importantly of all, there were no lights. They only had candles for light, so it was a very scary situation, but a lot of people did that, especially women and children. They wore coveralls when they came in that were handmade by Mrs. Mercer. So do you think you guys want to go on this tour more or that tour more?
That tour.
The same hole he came down? The one
Yeah, we widened it a bit and changed the opening just a little bit, but it's the same original position.
Oh, wow.
This trip is full of fail.
The formations right here are called draperies. And draperies form when the drip starts out up here and then rolls down and leaves behind a trail of calcite. Then another drip will start in the same area and roll down, so layers will build upon layers, and these pieces will just get wider and wider. Now, a lot of draperies and other formations have red or orange coloring through them. If you see a formation that looks red or orange, chances are that's rust or iron oxide that's making it look that way. But when it comes to draperies, because of the shape and color, we like to call them cave bacon.
Cave bacon.
Now, Mr. Mercer was really smart, and he understood a lot about human curiosity, and he understood if he brought people to his cave and told them not to touch anything, people would probably want to touch. So to protect the rest of the formations, he made this the official cave-touching stone. We also call them the cave twins because they look like an old man with a couple of eyes, a nose, and a big fluffy beard. And another old man with a couple of eyes, a crooked nose, a fluffy beard, and a bubble pipe. So feel free to come down and get all the touchy-feely inside your system because they are the only thing you can touch. Go ahead.
Wow.
No, it's real.
You can touch that. You can guys.
Yeah, all this was put in. The stairs and the concrete floor, yeah. That's called a grotto. It doesn't really go anywhere. Yeah, it just shows you a little area and it's got some cool stuff in it. They used to do that in the old days. They used to go everywhere in the cave that they fit into.
Does anything live in here?
No, it's too cold and there's no source of fresh water. All right, well, if you look back here, this is a grotto. And a grotto is a fancy word for a cave within a cave. Mr. Mercer named this particular one Fairy's Grotto because he thought the formations on the side here resembled little fairy houses. He would also sit up in the back of the grotto and tell fairy tales to his guests. He's a pretty whimsical guy. And then if you look up here, this is the Diamond Cascade Waterfall, named for all the little chunks of calcite in it that to Mr. Mercer looked like diamonds suspended in the frozen waterfall. This is flowstone, so it forms when the water flows over the rock and kind of leaves behind waterfall patterns. It's very, very pure calcite, and it's the color that the cave twins were before everyone started touching them. Gives a great example of what the oil damage will do after 135 years of people touching. Well, this formation over here is the oldest and largest formation that we have in the cave. It's 12.5 feet tall, about 10 feet around, and nearly 2 million years old. Wow. Now, columns form when a stalactite and a stalagmite meet and grow together in the middle. There's a few more throughout the cave, so keep your eyes open for them. Then Mr. Mercer also had a pretty big imagination. He named things after what he thought they looked like, and he thought a lot of the formations in this area looked like food. So we call it the old-fashioned meat and produce market. And we'll start out with some lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, string beans, the world's largest wax pepper, a long row of carrots, the lonely sweet potato, some chickens hanging by their feet, a big stuffed turkey ready for the oven, and if you don't believe me about the turkey, there's his head, a fish hanging by his tail from that ledge up there, and then for dessert we have our chocolate malt wall. Please no touching or licking. But if you're feeling a little more daring, we also have our chocolate-covered grasshopper, white chocolate pork. So are there any questions for me before we move on?
Why do you call those the vegetable ones?
Well, Mr. Mercer looked at them and he thought they looked like food, so he decided to name them. And since the cave was his, he could name whatever he wanted. All right, you all ready?
That's the fairy crown.
It's so cute.
Yeah.
I think I like this guy.
Well, this formation right here is the largest stalagmite that we have in the cave. We call it the giant bee's hive, partially because of its shape, but also because of its color. Because when you hold a light to it, it gives off a bit of a honey-colored glow. That's because calcite is translucent, so light will pass through it part way, but not all the way. Now, this one's 8.5 feet tall, and it's about 200,000 years old. And if you look at this little hole here, it was not natural. It was a torch hole that was hand-drilled by Mr. Mercer to hold the early torch. There's a lot of these throughout the cave, and there's one over here with an original piece of wood stuck inside. And if you look over here, we have our angel wings. These are our most well-known formation. They grace the cover of our brochure. They're about 30,000 to 40,000 years old, and the one on the left is 9 feet long. And as you're coming down, you want to look between the two angel wings. Growing there is the baby angel wing. That little white vein-looking formation is about 500 to 700 years old, and it gives a really good example of how slowly the calcite forms, because it takes 500 to 700 years for just 1 cubic inch to grow. Now there's a little bit of a puddle right here. The handrails get very slippery and it gets very steep from this point on out. So everyone be careful as you're going down. And don't hit your head on the giant cave bacon.
That's so amazing.
Can't hardly see it.
Here's some careful. Let's see, there's water there.
There's the angel wings.
Alright, into the water.
That little ridge between them is the baby one.
Just see it from this side. It's absolutely spectacular with the light coming through.
Well, that's where we're headed next.
It's all right. It's not my skin or my hair. Clothes are okay. They're not great.
So translucent.
It's open in the winter. It's just not very busy in the winter.
Isn't there more water coming out?
Well, there is more water coming down, but we never have any problems with flooding because we have an opening at the bottom where water will drain out.
Oh my god. This is really steep.
All right, we need to make room for everybody to come down, so I'll ask that you come forward a bit more. You can stand on the rock as long as you don't lean on anything. This room is called the coral room because of the formation covering the back wall. This is called cave coral, and the way that it forms is the carbon dioxide charged water builds up pressure behind a tiny pinprick hole in the wall and bursts out. It's very similar to when you shake up a can of soda really hard and then open it, except of course this process takes a lot longer. And in a similar way, these form. These are called helictites, and they defy all laws of gravity. This one has done a little 360-degree turn, so we call it the pig's tail. There's a few more helictites up on the wall over this way. Those ones are called the cave fingers. And they're pointing to Mr. Mercer's giant organ loft, named not only for these draperies that resemble the pipes on a pipe organ, he would also sit on the rock ledge in front of me and tap out tunes on these draperies with his gloved fingers. Because they're crystalline in structure, they actually make a very pretty sound when you hit them. And because each one had a different width, they made different notes. So you could sit up there and play almost entire songs. But where he went wrong is he let his guests start doing it. They got pretty rowdy and managed to break almost every single one. So we don't do that anymore, but fortunately they were wearing gloves, so they should grow back. And if you look over here, we have some jellyfish to fit in with the coral motif. And then if you look up on the ceiling, we have a washing machine agitator. Now the next set of stairs is even steeper than the last, and halfway down the first flight is a very low-hanging rock area called Limbo Rock. When you get to this point, you're going to want to lean back instead of forwards, because if you lean forwards, you might start human dominoes, and I'm at the bottom. Also, the bottom of the right handrail might be very wet, so be careful.